Greetings, friends. My name is Nate, and you're listening and watching the Perry Center podcast, where life meets life. I'm joined by great friends of mine and brothers, nonetheless. So Joe and Mr. Ben Larson, thanks for being here.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Happy to be here tonight.
As I was kind of coming up with a guest list, this was like the absolute top of my list of these people have lived life so differently for so long. And so I just wanted tonight to be just a special night where we can talk about stories, share thoughts, and reminisce a little bit. So tell me a little bit from your perspective of what was it like growing up with the parents that developed the Perry Center, and what was that like from your perspective?
That's a very broad question. I would say that it is. I've never run into another person. Well, I shouldn't say another. I've ran into very few people that have experienced what I think we've experienced, and some of it is where we went to school. Some of it is just like the life path that we lived. But the stories are definitely full, and sometimes I like to keep a lot of that stuff just for me. And so not everybody knows all the stories, so that's my world.
Yeah, I'd say it was definitely a unique upbringing. That it wasn't. It was later in life, probably in our teens and college, when you started to really recognize how different we were brought up versus friends and family, but that's kind of what we knew. We didn't. I guess I don't know if we grew up knowing that they were just, doing things that others weren't, and at the time, but later on it was like, boy, nobody seems to have similar stories, and like the adventures that we were on as a family, and it was a unique. Looking back, I'm super blessed that I got to have my kids involved with seasons of that, and they too have stories now where they can talk about how so unique from their friends, the scenarios that they got to see and live, and the stories they got to hear. So, yeah, it's pretty special in that sense,
Yeah. So the Perry Center has a rich history. I mean, it's been around. I mean, established 1986 officially, but things were happening late 70s, all of that. You guys were young during that time. So, from your perspective, how did this ministry? How did the Perry Center even start? So I know some of the stories of like dad coming home saying, hey, I put an ad in the newspaper, but just from your perspectives, how did that all establish? How did the Perry Center kind of come to be?
Yeah, good question. And, we were obviously younger, but from hearing the stories, and Ben's take might be a little. I think we're pretty similar on like the very beginnings. But
I'm older than you, so
you are. Yeah, I remember. I just remember my dad working for Jerry Fowles' Old Time Gospel Hour, and he was in charge of touring the Midwest and meeting with farmers and ranchers and people, just trying to connect with them that believed in what Jerry Fowles was doing out on the East Coast, and just bringing people to know Jesus. And so through that, they got talking, my dad and Jerry and some of the ministry, about how Roe versus Wade, I think, came in, and obviously there was a new abortion clinic coming to Fargo, and he came back, and through that ministry, ultimately came back and told my mom at the time, who was a registered nurse, yet raising young boys, saying, hey, there's something to do with an abortion clinic coming to town, that we need to do something about that. And so that's where kind of the seed, I think, was planted. and really acting out in faith and not just reading the scripture and letting it pass by, but saying, hey, we want to take an active role in our faith and doing what we can, because that's why we're here, you know. And that was my understanding as it started with the old time gospel hour.
Well, I remember having a conversation with my dad before he passed a few years back, and one thing he said to me is, I said, like, Dad, what did you, like, how did you get into this? And it's similar to that. He was working for Jerry Falwell. They brought him out. He saw the Liberty Godparent home, and it inspired him. Didn't know much about it, but think about, we were in South Moorhead. The house is gone now, but down by the river, I think it was 83, there was a flood down there, but there was a house there, and my mom with the two of us basically in the country, and we would have adventures and all kinds of things, but my dad would go on these trips, and he'd be gone for a week, 2 weeks at a time, out traveling to see some of Liberty's donors, or Old Time Gospel Hours donors. And he just said it was really hard because he had to be away from us, and he just could not forget about that time when he walked through and had a conversation about what they were doing out there, and there was somebody out there that encouraged him to go back and do something. And he thought about that for a couple weeks, and then I think he put in his resignation without any understanding of what he was going to do next. To be honest, like, I don't know if you remember that, but over at the house on 4th Avenue, he had stopped doing that, and they wanted to find something they could do on the weekends, and so they were doing hypnosis. They were young believers and didn't really know, and some people think that that's probably a bad thing. But we'd go in and sit on that couch with the
hypnosis couch, and we had the little ball that we would yeah. Real story. Yeah. It was stopping smoking and weight loss.
Yeah. And they would drag us along to those, and then I think he just was thinking about this place, and one day he came home and he said, Pat, I put an ad in, this is the phone number, and you might get a call from a girl.
And that was even before the Perry Center was established. That was just simply counseling women that were contemplating. The Perry Center wasn't even a conversation piece at the very beginning.
Yeah, that was even before they started picketing. That was before they even met Dave and Judy Perry. Like, it was just a guy going, I see a need, let's do it.
Yeah, let's just counsel women away from abortion. Let's give them a different option, talk through what that looked like. And that was the original, I guess, plant that he kind of threw on my mom, as people have heard that he would come up with the ideas and she would implement them in many cases. So I think that's.
And there was a movement in town that had kind of started with some Catholic families and some Protestants and just people across the boards, and apparently they were kind of meeting and doing different things, and then somebody said, you need to meet Dave and Judy Perry, and they said, oh, maybe someday, right? And then I guess they ended up meeting somehow, just struck a good conversation and started hanging out. The part that just blows me away about how different the ministry was, it was just people seeing a need that would get together. And there were times when Joe and I would be sitting on the steps listening to the conversations because we were supposed to be in bed. And my parents said, I can see your feet. But they wouldn't say that to us. They would just let us sit there. And we would hear Dave and Judy and Ann and Dave Pence and just all the people that were involved. And it was a ragtag group that would sit at the table at the house, and they would make a big pot of spaghetti, and they would sit and talk and pray. And eventually it was making signs, and it was putting together plans. And then one day my dad shows up with an old beat up bus. Remember that?
Yep.
Yeah, that was fun. He would show up with weird stuff all the time. And he was like, we're going to fix this bus up, and you can have girls. We'll park it down by the abortion clinic, and you can have girls come in, and you can counsel them in there. So took that on a few road trips.
I mean, literally Wild West. You know, when it comes to just developing something like this, I mean, you touched on it. These were just ordinary people gathering together without any strategic plan, without any, like, let's develop this, let's really sit and talk about this. But this is a need, and we just have to do it. This is our calling. And,
back to your first question, like how did it affect? There's so many ways, but one thing that I struggle with, and this is being transparent, is I struggle with being in organized church sometimes as a result of this, because I watched Jesus-loving, non-denominational people that went to churches across the FM area, and they got together and laid down all of that. So you go to a Bible study, right? A new group of people, and you sit down, and they're like, "Oh, share your story," and I'm like, "You're not ready for this," And so I have a harder time like connecting sometimes in that space, just because I've seen the sacrifice, and I've seen this like without saying, "Hey, you have to do X, or you have to do this, or you have to believe this." It's like, no, the core is Jesus came and he died, and we have a commission.
when we fast forward, I mean, let's get to where, okay, Darold comes home, put an ad in the newspaper, he hears the phone number, you're probably going to get a call. Pat, figure it out. However that conversation was, you guys would have been preteen, teen at that point? Not even?
Teen, yeah.
Yeah, so it would have been like, it was probably 6, 7.
So did you have any understanding of like, this is what's happening? Or did women just start showing up to your house or whatever?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think there was a season we moved from a Moorhead house because we couldn't afford that. And my dad, we lived in multiple, just to kind of, I'll go down a couple different avenues. We moved several different times throughout our childhood, because oftentimes all of the resources we had were always put back into like this, what we would consider the ministry work. And so we had what was my mom's dream home at the time on 4th Avenue that became kind of the hub, as Ben referenced earlier, in regards to a meeting place where that's probably my earliest like strong memory of people just showing up and as Ben said, praying together, and they were putting together the newsletters, and they would spend the evenings stuffing newsletters and getting the word out about just the need for help for these women, and so that was like for me an early season memory of Ben referenced again, sitting on the steps listening to these people just cry out to the Lord for help and direction without resources, totally limited. I mean, my parents drove old vehicles. We didn't have, it was shopping at thrift stores and getting whatever we could just to.
Garage sales.
A lot of garage sales, yeah. And so, but the house piece wasn't, my parents were never into like collecting like, an estate. It was, we're just going to do without, and we thought that's what people had. And I can't remember the question that I'm going down, but the early on, the stories of how it went from like a prayer meeting to all of a sudden, I think there was conversation where, hey, there's women that are now moms talking to, or even David Perry was seeing, he would meet with women that were pregnant or contemplating, and they would move into his house. They had the big mansion on Broadway, and so my
White House that was just restored.
it's restored downtown on Broadway now. But that was like, and they had a number of kids, and it was just like they would take him in, and so then there was a season where, okay, their house is full, and my parents were like, hey, there's a woman that's being dropped off at the bus station. Let's make a bed. And it's 2 a.m. and Dad's driving out of the bus station to pick up a young pregnant woman that we've just made her part of our family, and that's normal, sitting and having dinner with, in a sense, a revolving door of different women that would come and say, some longer than others, but there was no established Perry Center. This was just, again, seeing a need, I guess, from a perspective and then meeting it. And, I talked to other people, and even I talked to, like, if I were to bring up to my wife, hey, there's a woman in need, she's going to stay at our house, she'd be like, huh? Like,
what?
Yeah, like that, you can't do that, but that was just something that they did, and at times even multiple, and just a part of the family. That's normal, right?
Yeah.
But like the Perry Center then came about, right? Because there was an event happening, and I don't know if I'm fast forwarding or not, because there's a lot of them. We can bring it back, but there was an event that Mom and Dad, along with the Perrys, Dave and Judy, and a couple of the older kids were supposed to attend down in Minneapolis together, and in that moment, that morning, they were supposed to leave, and I think Mom had just got a call to counsel someone. The emotions, right? And she decided to take the call, counsel a woman. And the Perrys that day ended up, getting in a car wreck. They hit on the highway.
Yeah, the pylon.
Hit a pylon, and both David and Judy passed away, and a couple of the kids were seriously injured, and yet, my parents were devastated because they're saying, man, like, we thought we were doing the work of the Lord, right?
The community, I think, was
the community, yeah.
Just,
I mean, at the time, First Assembly was packed to the walls, for the funerals of both of them. You have, a number of the kids, big family that were dispersed. They didn't have parents, and from the legacy piece of the Perry Center, now who's gonna meet with these women for free? Who's gonna, where these women are gonna stay? Because the need continues. It's even growing. And now what? And I think there was that moment where.
Yeah, I remember that time. If I just back up a little bit, I remember when my mom and dad were getting involved, my dad had a friend, Linzar, and the two of them were hooligans, but they loved the Lord, and they always wanted to go preach the gospel and do things. So they decided to go down to the abortion clinic, but they never would go to the actual sidewalk in front of it. They would be like 2 blocks away, and they'd say, Pat, I just want you to just go up there and just be ready in case a girl comes by, and we'll be over here praying for you. And so I was going to say that sometimes getting courage to go out and do ministry is a step. It's like stepping stones. It's not just one day you wake up and you're immersed in ministry. Even the ones you think are bold, that years later are doing things that you would never do. It's just taking those little steps. So they finally start picketing or being there, and my mom she never ever once held a sign. She just prayed with girls and met with girls and things like that. And then the Perrys, and that started happening, and she did get a call. They got invited to go with the Perrys down to the cities for just a weekend away, and got into an accident. And I would say for like 2 months after that, there was a vacuum in the pro-life movement. The people that were there didn't know who the leader was. They didn't know who or what to do. They know they had some plans, but how do you implement those with those people, gone? And then there was a point where I remember this. Her name was Gail. my dad took you and me and sat us down on the couch, and they said, hey, we're going to be bringing a girl to stay with us. And you've seen us, in the Perrys. She's going to stay with us. She's going to stay on the 3rd floor, and we want you to love her like she's a sister, and just, she's going to be here. And we said, okay. Yeah. We were young. We were like, okay, sounds good. And Gail moved in. She was skittish. She was single, didn't have anywhere to go, and we loved on her. And it was fun because we just accepted her for who she was. She was rough around the edges. I remember her laugh, I can hear it. And lots of great conversations.
She stayed with us for a while.
Yeah. And one little story I think is pretty funny. So she did smoke. And back then we were like, smokers. Oh, absolute sinners.
They need to go talk to that hypnosis
Guy.
Get her signed up.
Joe and I kept trying to win her to the Lord, right? And we'd say, smoking is bad and that's a sin. And my dad had to tell us, I remember him pulling us aside and saying, look, we're going to love her where she's at. It doesn't matter what she's doing. So stop doing that. And we're like, okay, fine, but you know that it's wrong, right? So, yeah, it was crazy. I mean, we were kids just watching ministry happen in real time.
Yeah, and the memories start to flow. So even before the Perry Center and the pro-life, there was something, he brought up Lynn Sarr for a moment. My parents, nowadays people see them, I see them as these warriors for the Lord, but they had a history apparently, which later in life I learned more about that. But there was, when my dad came to know the Lord, everything, God did an immediate transformation.
Radical.
And he went from a guy that loved to party and do things to a guy that just wanted to do what God wanted to do. And so one of the things that they started downtown, before downtown is what it is today.
I forgot about that.
It was called the Holy Smoke Shop.
Yes,
the Holy Smoke Shop.
This. Yeah.
And they rented
they chose that name on purpose.
Yeah. Well, and they found just an abandoned kind of a corner property downtown. And they turned it in. It was Ben and I would hang out there in the kitchen area, where knives, really things everywhere, and we're little kids running around chasing each other with stuff. But they would have spices. There'd be just a lot of drunk, homeless people there, and they would bring in people that would just, worship and love on these people and serve them a warm pizza and it was just a sweet. I just remember this memory thinking, this is a little odd, Ben and I.
Nobody else does this.
There'd be the little back in the day where you'd go up to the register and they have candy bars in the window that you could, and that we'd be hoping for a Snicker bar, for a dime or whatever it was, a quarter. But anyway, just going back to the fact that they didn't oftentimes look to make sure everything was in order. It's here's what God has kind of put into place, and we're going to see what God does with it. And so the Holy Smoke Shop was an example.
They would bring in these mid-level gospel artists and families to come put a concert on, and they would just open the doors and anybody could come in. And then there were nights where they didn't have anybody, and my dad would be like, Clara, can you come down and play? And she'd go down, and my grandma on his side, she was just happy to just come play, and she would play the piano and sing old gospel tunes, and people would come from.
There was not a moneymaker.
No,
this was not a moneymaker.
Holy Smokes was not a moneymaker.
Holy Smoke Shop.
Yeah, they gave away more pizzas than they sold. They were broke all the time.
Yeah. What I love about this, I just picture you guys young, just running around like crazy.
We were.
And then going to school, and everyone's like, what'd you do this weekend? What'd you do this weekend? You're just going down the line. You're like, we were at the Holy Smoke Shop.
Right. Oh.
And just running around with knives and hanging out.
Yep.
And this is where, my life at the Perry Center, I haven't been with the Perry Center terribly long, a decade. And coming into a maternity home, I had no idea what I was even getting myself into. And the more you're involved in these women's lives and ministering to them, there are those moments that you're like, oh wait, that's not normal. Like this, other people don't do this. I remember going to Denny's. I would take the residents for breakfast. I come walking in with like 8 to 10 residents who are all pregnant or have children, and it's just me walking into Denny's, and then I'm just table for however many, and people would start looking and staring, and then of course there's a couple of ladies at a table that aren't really quiet with their conversation. They're like, I wonder what their story is, or and then it would say, wow, life is very different. And so do you guys have any of those moments? I mean, they can be funny, they can be serious, but any of those moments where you're like, oh, other kids don't do this, or other people, I mean, it could be holy smokes, Perry Center, or whatever it is.
Well, and we'll bounce around, but one of my, I don't know if it's a fond memory, but it's a memory where in high school, at one point my dad ran for U.S. Senate. And that was in the early 90s, and it was Larson for life for U.S. Senate was his campaign slogan.
No holds barred.
It made national headlines because he intentionally ran the most graphic, ads right during the 5 and 6 o'clock news hour when everybody's sitting down eating dinner together.
People were so mad.
And so I remember going to school, and my friends were like, is that your dad that's running for Senate? I was like, it's my dad. Yeah, and they're like, and they all knew my dad. They're like, okay, all right. I was like, yes, this isn't normal, But we just embraced it, and again, because it was the heart of, just where can I make the maximum impact with minimal resources and being led in certain directions. I remember. And we can bounce different stories, Ben. I don't want to hog the mic here.
I was going to say, I had a different experience to that.
Yeah.
So I remember when that happened, and I went to school, and I actually got talked to by my football coach that I probably shouldn't be in public because it's going to bring a bad name to the team. And I remember students making comments to me, and lots of whispering. So you were definitely blessed in that space, because I don't know. I even had teachers make comments to me like, "That's your dad, right?" Yep. And downhill from there. So it's not easy. It wasn't easy by any means. And actually there were a lot of times where, so we both went to Fargo South, and where the dome where they play basketball, one of the back corners, they used to have a public phone in there. And I remember being on that phone with my parents my sophomore, junior year, so many different times, just like weeping. Like, it's so hard, I want to get out of here. We go to Oak Grove or somewhere else, and my dad and mom would just say, I understand it's tough, but you just got to stick it out. We don't get to choose the places we're at. So it was definitely different, but I had two teachers. Mr. Hoagland, if you're listening, you were a savior to me. So he is a believer. And his family was involved with music at different churches and things. And shortly after that, he invited me in. He said, "Hey, you collect baseball cards?" I do. And so he invited me and a couple of other people in and would trade with us.
Did he give you a good deal?
That's where I got my second year Michael Jordan rookie from.
Gave you a good deal then.
Gave me a good deal. But it was rough. I mean, I worked through it, and I had friends at church and stuff like that, but it was tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we a lot of interesting memories of when we were younger, and some of the stories that there was a moment where back in the day when the abortion clinic was around, and at that stage, there were, I guess, I think they called them Lambs of Christ, made their ways around the country, and a bunch of them came to Fargo, and basically what they were doing was they were doing their best to prevent women from going in, or giving a little more time for somebody to do sidewalk counseling, and so there was a season where they were living with us as well, just Dad opened the house up to, there's one guy that, didn't talk at all, and it was definitely a different environment. That was later in life in high school, I guess, but.
Martin Wishnowski.
Yep. Yeah, Martin was around then. That's where he kind of had come from. But one specific memory, which I think, if we can ever find the article about this, would be incredible, was when they were out counseling one day, and all of a sudden you saw Santa Claus walk up with a bag of gifts.
Oh man, I was hoping you would share this story.
Yeah, and everybody's out, and Santa Claus just walks by, and the escorts at the time were just like, "Oh, fantastic, Santa Claus here," and he's like, "Do you mind if I come in and pass out some gifts?" And they're like, "No, come on." And so they invited my dad in to the abortion clinic,
not knowing he was Darold Larson.
Yeah, invited him in, dressed as Santa Claus, and all of a sudden my dad is in there, and he goes, "Can I pass out gifts?" They're like, "Absolutely." He starts pulling them out. Is baby Bobby here? And then is baby Jane here? And starts calling off these, and all of a sudden they realize this is Darold Larson, and immediately called the cops. Santa Claus was arrested, spent the weekend.
It was a week.
Yeah, week. Yeah, it's all. Dad was gone for the week. Santa Claus made national news, getting arrested, and that was just again a creative moment of saying, you know what, the impact of being in that environment. And there was other times where actually there was a time when I think probably in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, somewhere in that range, where Mom and Dad both spent a weekend in jail. And Ben and I and Tim, our other brother Tim,
what did you do this past weekend?
We basically got to have the weekend to ourselves as whatever 6. I mean, if honestly at the time had people known, they probably would have found a way, just because of the hatred for my parents. They probably would have taken. Nobody checked on us, but our grandparents, and they're like, "Oh, you're good, okay, yeah,
You're fine."
yeah."
Wow.
So, but those moments were, I think there was a season. I don't have a recollection of all of a sudden knowing that things are different here than the guy next door.
Well, I mean, so just the wild things that would happen too along the way, because it wasn't just about the Perry Center. It was like the questions that were brought up afterwards were, how can we meet the needs of the whole person? So whether that's they find out they're pregnant, they need a place to stay, get them a job, adoption, counseling, all the things, right? So my dad keeps throwing ideas out. My mom kind of implements them, and they get them rolling. They get the things going. And then one day, it was about the time when the Lambs of Christ were in town and some of the other groups that were here, my dad just got a hair because he found a church over in Moorhead, which is off of, 11th Street. And they said, he was like, "You're going to condemn that? I'll take it." And so he bought it for a song and a dance. And there was a house next to it. It was an old parsonage. And of course, the first Perry Center, which was down on Main Avenue, I think they just tore it down, but it used to be right across from the McDonald's there. We ripped out all the carpets. We cleaned the place, did some painting. They got a lot of people that were coming to volunteer.
We didn't do all that. We were older people. We were good at wrecking things.
Yeah, we would
You
do all
guys were at the Holy Smoke Shop.
demo
That's right.
work.
You were busy.
Yeah. I remember plenty of times they did that. They would order pizza and then send us home.
Right. Yeah, that was a disappointment. Yeah.
Yeah, but they bought the house with the church over in Moorhead, and they started another church, right? So they're doing ministry in the basement, and there's prayer groups, and there's a church going on upstairs with Milt Hoyk and other ragtags, and it was like we were surrounded by ragtags all over the place. I mean, there was a lot of other normal people too, but there was a lot of ragtags, and it was just normal for us. And my dad would drag us to Bible studies all the time. I think that's how we learned how to read, finding the nuggets, you'd call it, you know? And just the ministry opportunities we saw, and it was a lifestyle for him. It wasn't something where it was like, well, I'm going to do this, and then that's going to be it, and we'll do it for just a little bit and be done. You know, it was literally until death do us part, you know, because he was doing ministry.
Well, I think you mentioned ragtags. I think that's a big piece where I think my dad probably taught us all to love the ones that are probably left behind.
Yep.
Like he did a really good job of that. Just
I still pick people up.
yeah, I believe you do.
I do. It's
Yep.
true.
But he'd do a really great job of projects that needed to get done, and is go find people that were down and out to employ them, and then he would always leave them. Ben and I both have the stories of him hiring out homeless people, and at the end of the job, he would probably overpay them, and then oftentimes give them a bag of new socks, brand new socks, and he'd always say, "I want to leave a sweet taste in your mouth," and give them a candy bar, you know. And those moments where you're looking at it going, "Dad, that's weird. Like if somebody gave me a pair of socks, candy bar, sure, a pair of socks, like it's kind of awkward." But then he started explaining the fact that, hey, the number one need in the homeless shelters and on the street is socks, and what better way to start, and so that was impactful because you'd see the guys like so grateful and so thankful, right?
And the truth of the matter is, like, he never even had the money to give them that.
We probably needed socks.
Yeah,
you know,
he probably did need
He probably
socks.
took your socks.
he probably took our socks.
He's
Yes,
like, well, let's just pass these
Remember
on.
seeing my jeans? I don't know where those jeans are.
the Huskies, yes.
What I love, and I spent a little bit of time with your dad. I spent a lot of time with your mom, and from day one, it was we love people and we love people well. And even sharing some of these stories, like that's your whole life. That's what you've been brought up in, and your whole life has been around ministry, and not this like structured ministry, but it was just loving people well. And I know that like your parents instilled this in you. And it could be like sitting down conversations back and forth, but even they were just living it out and you were watching it. And so just as you're thinking, what are some of those like big takeaways when it comes to ministry, or some things that you have taken and you're like passing on to your children, your family? What are those impactful ministry things that you are living and passing on to your children?
One thing my dad said to me a long time ago, he said, "It's the soul, not the shell." And that really stuck with me, is like, you have to see past all of this to see what is really inside, because you don't know where people came from, you don't know the circumstances they were in, you don't know anything. And so when you see a person, do you see a soul, or do you see a nuisance? Do you see somebody that is better than you or is lower than you, or do you see a soul? And I don't know that I do it as well as he did. And I do remember some times where I had to slow him down because he really wanted to get a project done, and he may have hired some homeless guys, but he really wanted to get him back so he could get on to the next project. So I'm like, "Dad, we're going to KFC." "Well, I don't know. We got to meet." "No, we're going to KFC. They got a good buffet. These guys will be happy." And then sit down and talk to him. Were you working with us when he picked up the one guy who was a Russian? The little crazy Russian. Oh man, that was so funny.
That was the beginning of the thrift store.
That was the beginning of this thrift store, and he worked with us for like 2 weeks, and but he just loved people. Honestly, loved to sing as loud as he could. Didn't care what anybody thought. He would sing because it was to his creator, not to anybody else. So,
Yeah, I think I could go on for a long time about just some of the qualities that were passed on, but I think and there's different ones for each of them, but I'll start with my dad and go to my mom. But I think one of the best things that I learned that I've tried to pass on to my kids and people around is my dad was very good at forgiving.
Yeah. I've never met another person like that. Ever.
Yeah. There's times where I think it'd be argued that he didn't do everything right in a lot of other people's eyes. His heart was right. And he was, I think, many times probably hurt.
Very wounded.
But you would never hear him talk poorly about anybody that would hurt him. He would oftentimes just, go and ask for forgiveness, and then yet forgive them, and to the point where I think we're like, Dad, like, you have a right to be angry and cast them out, right? But to watch his grace and just forgiveness is unmatched.
That's one thing my wife says to me from time to time. She says, "You let people walk on you," and it's not that I let them walk on me. It's just what I saw modeled. Is like I can't hold a grudge. I can't be upset because, like, if I really get down to it, I do love these people, and that is something I learned from my dad.
I'm not as probably gracious and forgiving.
I know you're not. You're a little hardcore.
No. My mom, I think, she was a gifted counselor in the sense of just listening and allowing people to talk. I think she did just amazing work when sitting and building relationships with women that were just broken. And as Ben stated earlier, she's and staff, just being able to sit and listen to them and give her we have stories, my kids have stories of the big joke these days is like grandma was never on time for anything.
Nothing.
And when you'd get upset, she'd say, well, I was counseling a woman. What do you want me to do? Tell her to have an abortion? And it's like, oh, okay, all right.
It's like the biggest thing you can
what are
throw
you
in
gonna
your
do?
face.
What are you gonna do?
Oh, man.
And so, but she was a woman that would always have time for anybody. Wouldn't matter like where you were, what was going on. Our friends from high school and the kids in the neighborhood to this day that were raised would always know that grandma will always have time and she'll always listen and she's going to give good counsel. And so never with expectations and just simply there to listen and be an encouragement and point you in the direction.
She always made food for everyone too.
Yeah.
Always had food for everybody.
Yep. And so just with mom being able to listen and just to love on everybody was just a total gift that's in many cases just unmatched because of the way God, made her to be able to just, be a part of people's lives. So, I mean, I could go on for them, but there's so many just incredible stories of living in a different world with my parents and, with the goal of, just doing ministry. And when I say ministry, it wasn't for their glory because they literally, I don't remember them ever thinking, I need to save for retirement. I need to build a bigger house. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying, matter of fact, there's times where I would chew them out. Like, you guys, at some point, need to take care of yourselves, but they were like, is that my job? Like, really? Are we here to do bigger things than just, oh, come on, but just special individuals, in the Perry Center, such a sweet spot in our legacy as a family and our community, the number of women's lives and families that have been touched through that is just an incredible testament to their faithfulness in doing what's really hard. We went, I can't tell you the number of seasons that we went through where where mom and dad would be sitting around the table at dinner, and they're like, hey, meal's going to be a little sparse tonight because we had to make payroll, and everybody gets paid before we see dinner tonight. And then God would just provide, seeing the way that they would walk in faith, and I know even, when Nate, when you first started, that was a challenge. You go from a corporate world to, not having to think about that stuff to then all of a sudden be really dependent on God's gifts, and people's willingness to act and give. And it's an amazing road. You look back and think, raising 3 kids, walking in what I see as true faith and trusting God for every meal, for every vehicle repair, and any extra dollars that comes in goes right back into the ministry, to the point where, I think there was times when mom and dad would argue at times, but they'd come to the realization it was the right thing to do. That's what God had called them to do at that season. So,
and I'm actually reminded every time I read that verse or hear that verse, when Jesus sent out the disciples and he said, don't want you to bring your clothing, don't want you to bring any food, don't you want to bring any money? And they're like, what? What do you mean? Don't bring your sword. I'm going to provide. And you watch these 12 disciples look at that and just scratch their head and go, what in the world? And he goes on to say, in a roundabout way, I want people to be able to bless you. That is their blessing, the giving. And there were many people that dropped groceries off. I remember there was a time where we had no meat in the whole house. And there was somebody that showed up with like a side of beef, and our freezer was full. There were kids in the neighborhood, and I remember we went on vacation, and one of the kids knew our freezer was full, and he broke in our house and stole our own meat. Remember that? Mm-hmm. He stole all the meat. And my dad was like, oh man, that guy, well, guess he needed it more than us. And we're sitting there going, but we know who did it.
That's our meat. We can go down the street and get him. Yeah. Let's go.
And he said, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're just going to love on him. And I just saw an amazing amount of faith and love and mercy. And I think it follows the ministry today, because I know that I've seen sacrifice from people like you, Nate, and it inspires me to say that the legacy is living on. When you're doing ministry, it's tough. Like, I even think of the times, you're reading in the Bible when these guys go out and do it. I mean, most of them were persecuted, ridiculed, whatever. Sure, there's a story, but what about the after and the prior and all the things that happen? And we get cozy sometimes, and you just gotta get gritty and just follow him, even if it's just a little step. Maybe if it's 2 blocks away, I think it's something we can learn from Pat and Darold.
I agree. I mean, ministry, I spend a lot of time talking about this. I share it with staff, with residents, with people in church on a national scale, where it's ministry isn't meant to be comfortable. God doesn't call us to sit on a beach with our toes in the sand and just be. No, he sends us to hard places to do hard things. And I shared this in a staff meeting one time, like the story in Mark where Jesus goes to this community, and there's this man that is shackled up running around in the tombs like a crazy man, and he casts demons out of this man, legions, and the pigs, it goes in the pigs, they fly over the cliff. I mean, cliff notes of this, but this man says, Jesus, I want to follow you. I want to go with you. And he's like, no. You don't get to go with me. You got to go tell the community what I've done. And so I just picture that man, like the easy thing would be getting in a boat with Jesus. But he's like, the people that you've been bugging forever, for however long with these demons, that you have to go back into this community and build, like they lost their economy. They lost all of these things because of this man. Right. And so I just think that has been something that's kind of stuck with me. Jesus, like God sends us to hard things and hard places. And the Perry Center ministry is that hard thing. There's so many people that I talk to that, it's just probably so fun to just work with pregnant people. And I'm like, it is so hard. And people don't get it. And so I think that God calls us to press in, dig in. It's get gritty.
You know, one thing I've learned from my dad is don't forget to include your family. Because if you don't include them, they're missing out on a blessing. Because I watch how even when they were doing ministry, well, in the beginning, my mom was doing counseling on the front porch. Many times there'd be like 1 or 2, 3 girls sitting on this couch. And at the time, my brother was about 2, not this one, the other one, Tim. And he would crawl into the room, and my grandma would come and go, oh, we got to get it. And he would, get up on their leg and then sit on their lap and interact with these girls. And even that little 2-year-old, changed the tone even before they met with Pat. And there's just so many things, even when you're not really thinking about it, where your kids can play a role and they don't even have to do ministry. They're just there.
I remember, so I love that my family's involved. Sometimes it's stressful, and to like talk about work. I mean, we're living it every day. We see them all the time. And I remember my daughter, who is a teenager now, I don't even know, I can't even remember, maybe 8 or 9 or something like that. And we had to pick up a resident from school. And so this resident gets in and she was sharing like, I can't believe I ran into the father of baby at school and it was awful. And he said, I'm nothing. And my daughter, who didn't know anything about relationships or people, and she's like, she just starts preaching to this young girl that is 15 years old, and she's like, you don't need him, the only thing you need is Jesus. And I'm like driving just I can't handle this anymore. But it's so true. It's a family thing.
It has to be.
Yeah. And I love that, like, it just carries on. It carries on. I know not everyone knows this, and I don't know how public it is, but I know, like, your mom has had some health issues. And one of the most impactful things that she has ever said to me was when her mind was starting to decline. And to sit in a room with her, and she knew me, and she's like, Nate, you're like just talking back and forth. And she like stops me and she goes, Nate, we did some pretty amazing things, but I have no idea what they are. And I just like, that has sat with me for so long, that she has done so many amazing things. Your parents have done so many amazing things. And you can't recount them all, but like lives were impacted. And she knew that, like, lives were changed. I don't know exactly how or what we did or even how I talked to this person, but I know lives were changed. And that is something that, like, I just sit in. Like, sometimes it's not a conversation. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just how we're living. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's bringing a meal to somebody, saying hi to somebody, and it's just life. And that was one thing that just has always hit me. I've carried it on to my family as well. Like, hey, and even team, like we're going to do amazing things. God's going to do amazing things, and we have no idea what they are going to be. Right. And we might not even remember them or whatever, but we know that God is doing amazing things, and he's using us, this ragtag group that doesn't even make sense, to do this work, which is super special.
That's good. And I'll piggyback for that for 2 seconds. And people have probably heard me tell this story about my dad and his whole audacious goal to pray to win 1 million souls to the Lord.
I was just thinking of the same thing.
And I just remember hearing him say that, and I'm just thinking, you are a lunatic, like something doesn't add up here. How do you win 1 million souls to the Lord? Dad, you're one person, right? And yet, it was one life at a time that became to know the Lord. And it wasn't until he passed that it started, the picture started to kind of unfold, and how like each seed that was planted, whether it's through the Perry Center or hearing people talk about how he would just read about somebody in the newspaper that was being dragged through the mud, right or wrong. He would just find out later, he would just stop in at their business or reach out to them for a cup of coffee and just love on them and tell them about the Lord. And hearing an old Perry Center resident that became, loved the Lord, gave her life to the Lord, and is now a missionary over in Africa, leading the next generation to the Lord. And it's sitting there thinking, my dad wasn't crazy. Like, he'll see, those 1 million souls.
I had a conversation about a week before he passed, and he actually said to me when he was laying in bed, he said, I know you know about my goal. I never really told a lot of people what he said, but I don't think I'm going to get there. And I said, Dad, what are you talking about? You don't know. You have no idea the people that you've touched. He was down and discouraged, and I just said, you don't know. If that's the goal that God gave you, that's his promise. Just because Abraham didn't see the offspring of sands on the million shores doesn't mean that that's not going to be true. So I think the end for my dad, like he went out surrounded by family, knowing he did everything that he could, and it was more of a day of rejoicing than anything.
So, and that's been everybody's mentality, like your family. Your mom would always share, like, we're seed planters. We're not always going to see the fruit of it. And it's just those things that sit with you. Like, what we're doing, we might not know the effects. And I've even seen it in my time at the Perry Center, where a resident that maybe leaves on bad terms or whatever comes back and are like, this was the best place for me. Let me tell you about my family. Let me tell you about what I'm doing in church. And you're like, whoa, wait a second. Where did this come from? Yeah. But understanding that what we're doing, it necessarily isn't now that we're going to see something. And I think God is like, hey, you're getting a little discouraged. Let me throw you something, so you can see, like, keep on going. Yeah. But yeah, I love that your family has had that mentality. Like, we don't know exactly what we're doing, but we're seed planters, and there's something bigger happening.
Like, if there was ever a scene in a movie that would be my mom and dad, it was the Dumb and Dumber scene, and they're driving down the road, and they see the people on the side of the road. Pick them up!
Yeah.
Pick them up! Let's do it!
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, there were so many times my dad would come home with people and be like, hey, Pat, we got guests. And she's like, what? Yeah. And they would sleep on the floor or kick us out, and they'd sleep on our beds.
Yeah.
I love it.
I know that if my dad was here today, and if my mom's health was a little bit better, that she'd be so proud of just, everything that's happening at the Perry Center these days. Like, it's a sweet piece. It's a sweet piece of the of our legacy, and my kids are aware of it. Ben's kids will be aware of it in the future, and Tim's are aware of it. It's just really sweet to see God continue to work from a seed that was planted years ago, without a dollar to their name, and it's a testament of just God's faithfulness.
Yeah, God worked through a little pastor in Moorhead at an EV church on the north side. My dad was down and out, and he told the story. He walked in there, and this pastor just mentored him, encouraged him. And one day, Darold gave his life to Christ. Simple as that.
Set it in motion. Yeah, it's good.
And change generations.
Yeah.
And change generations.
That's right.
As we come to a close, you guys have a million stories. I've spent many hours of my life sitting in offices with you, laughing hysterically at just random things that have happened. There were so many avenues of even like Perry Center and Family Life Ministries. There was a thrift store. There was
Thrift store.
I remember like Darold walking into my office one time, and he was like, and he wasn't breathing super well, and he was wheezing as he's walking in. I was like, oh, Darold's on his way. And he's like, Nate, I want to start a car dealership ministry. And I was like, Darold, I have questions. He's like, nope, figure it out. And then he like turns around and like shuffles on his way out. And I was like, I don't even know. So I'm like Googling like, how do you start a dealership ministry? And it's like, I don't understand this. So there are so many funny stories that we share, that we laugh. Off camera, we have other ones, I'm sure, that are just so funny. Like speed round here, what is a hilarious story that sticks with you? Ministry, family, what is something that just hits you and you just start laughing?
So it's sad, but it's also really funny if you think about it. So there was a time we were living on 4th Avenue. Money was a little tight. We had to adjust. So Dad was making deals behind the doors. Didn't really tell my mom. Just came home one day and said, oh yeah, by the way, there's going to be a sale tomorrow. He put an ad in the paper, and people just started showing up. There was no prices on anything. He was just walking around saying, yep, I'll take that. Oh, yeah, come on,
So you're selling your personal items?
Everything.
Yeah, he cleaned out the house, and then he'd done that more than once. There was another time where we were home for Christmas, or I think it was Christmas or something, where we're at the dinner table again. We loved our family meals, and Dad's like, hey, you're going to want to round up your friends tomorrow because I just sold the house. My mom's like, huh? You just sold the house? Yeah, we're going to move. We're moving over here. We couldn't afford this one any longer, so now I found a contract for deed somewhere else. And so I was like, oh.
I feel like he loved that word, contract for deed.
It's still to this day, the joke is that my mom was never early or on time for anything.
Still.
There was, we could go on countless, the jokes, my dad and I had a summer where, when we were fixing up the Perry Center before the buildings were built here, that we had a rule because I just moved back here. My wife was pregnant with the kids, and ultimately, fixing toilets up north, light bulbs, but we would always get the stuff wrong. Like when we go to the hardware store. So our rule was for the whole summer, anytime you drive by a Dairy Queen, you had to stop, And so like it was literally, multiple times a day, ice cream cones.
For any listener, like Midwest, North Dakota, there's a Dairy Queen on every corner in the city. Dairy Queen.
Well, I remember one other quick one is we were supposed to go on a trip, and I don't remember what the trip was about, but the week before the trip, my dad said, hey, everybody, we're going to go to an auction. Let's go to this auction. And so we get in the car, and he's like, bring the dog. It'll be great. Let's go have a good time. So we went to this auction. We're walking around. We're looking at stuff, and pretty soon the auctioneer said, hey, well, the next item was we got this little white dog. And he put the dog up for auction. It's our dog. Sold for $5. We were so mad at him. We were driving to the next weekend. He was like, yeah, I couldn't afford boarding.
Sell the dog at an auction.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, we did have a rule that was always, because my dad had so many ideas, and my mom would just but we always had to, I think it was like, give it 5 minutes or something like that, or no, 15 seconds. At least give all my ideas 15 seconds was his rule, because we'd be like, Dad, enough. Like, I mean, you heard it all the time, just the never ending. So,
Podunkville.
yeah, a lot of bad stuff, a lot of bad ideas. So, but no, they were a gift, So,
And lots of laughs and lots of singing and lots of joy in the house, even when we had nothing. And when we had something. So, it's good times.
So as we close, so obviously Perry Center is growing in different ways. As we close, what are those things that excite you of where we're going or what we're doing to be here forever?
Well, I'm excited that you're putting a pool out here. I'm just kidding. All you donors out there is no pool.
No pools.
Just want to make sure.
No pools.
I'm excited about. Have you heard some of the ideas that this guy has?
yeah, I mean,
T-shirt company.
Here's what
doing all kinds of stuff.
Here's what I can tell you that I'm the most excited about. Like, all that stuff is great, but I honestly, I think from day one, as I was a part of my mom's process of just trying to find the right fit, the right director that could kind of get things, continue on the path that it was on for so many years, is that ultimately, when I look back and I see buildings are being built and things happen, like, that's great. I like that. But what I really love is like the heart of the ministry is still there. And it's not about structures. It's never been about structures.
Ever.
It's never been about how nice and new everything is, but it's about lives, and the biggest fear before my dad passed and before the transition took place of the legacy founders stepping away was, will the ministry continue in its course of spreading the gospel to hurting people? It's been very evident that hasn't changed. That's, if it changes, that's where it's like, oh, that's a disappointment. Like, that's where the legacy is, in a sense, broken, right? But to look at it and say, at the core is loving people and pointing to Jesus. And that's what I think should get people excited. It's not about, buildings are beautiful. We need great places, and we need to train up young women to be good mothers. But we can do all that, and if they don't know the Lord, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And so that's what gets me excited.
Thanks for making me feel like a jerk. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be funny.
It's
and
easy.
You bring this out.
It's easy.
Everybody's crying.
No,
Jeez.
but that, yeah. So
No,
I just
I would agree with that. Like, I remember the day that she decided, and you didn't even know. I remember,
Just a whole nother story.
I remember
of how I
when
even
she
got
decided.
here.
She said she woke up in the morning. She was like, "It's gonna be Nate," and I was like, "Well, does he know?" Not yet.
No, I don't.
Yeah, not yet. But here we are, down the road, and I can't imagine. I can't imagine anybody else doing this. Like, and that brings me joy. Not because it's you; it's because God has your heart, and He doesn't just have your heart, but your family.
Can I tell you where the solidification was, in just like our family looking at each other and saying, yeah, like God got it right this time. And it's not about Nate, right? Because Nate's going to come and go at some point, but where we saw like the true, I guess, heart shift in the right direction was the very first Perry Center event that Nate was in charge of. And again, it's not about Nate, but in this environment, the worship team or the band didn't show up. And it was like an hour before, and I'm sitting there going, of course it didn't. Of course, the place is going to fall apart. The first event that, mom's not a part of or anything. We're like, Nate, what are you going to do? I'm just going to get out my guitar and we're just going to worship. What do you mean? And so we literally sat back, and it was like it was just the sweetest moment to say.
It was back to the core. Like,
Yeah.
There's a Ramada over in Moorhead, and I remember the very first Perry Center. It was his sisters that got up and just sang because they couldn't afford anybody. And there was maybe, there was maybe like 100 people at most that were there, and they just spent time worshiping and then talked about their vision, and I felt like it was Darold.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. So that was that moment where it's like, it's not about like trying to perform, but it's about like, let's point people to Jesus. And I was like, thank you, Lord.
Yeah.
So
good.
So thank you.
It's a joy. It is. I clearly remember that event and how.
I didn't even know you knew how to play guitar. That's why I was like, this guy is going to get up and play guitar.
I remember Ben was running sound on stage. And we're sharing stories, and he's crying on stage. And then I'm just like, I'm going to lead worship. And I started leading worship. And I'm like, I got to go talk now. And so I like walk over and like I'm talking, like moving guitars. I was like, who's going to come back and even hear like the stories that are happening? But we have just so many stories and so many memories. And I'm looking forward to even sharing more in the future with you guys. It's been a joy to have you guys on this couch hanging out with me and just talking life. And just you guys have been so instrumental in my life that I know whatever I'm going through, you guys get it. And I can make a phone call and you will pick up. And there's times I've called Ben. I'm like, hey, I need you here just to stand here. And he's like, okay, I'm on my way. I've called you. We've talked for 2 hours on the phone of just because I understand that there are very few people that get what I'm going through. And to know like I have two right here in my city. I just love you guys. I'm so grateful for you guys.
You're welcome.
And you're a blessing, no doubt.
Yeah.
It's good.
That's why I show up late. Just to remind you.
Picking up
the
people.
Founders.
It's so good.
Keeping the legacy alive.
That's what I do.
Well, friends, I am so grateful that you have tuned in to this episode. Of course, if you are new, listening to this and trying to understand what is the Perry Center, they're all new, but trying to understand what the Perry Center is, I encourage you to check out our social medias. Wherever you go for social medias, we are there. And of course, you can check out our website at perrycenter.org. I look forward to seeing you guys in future episodes.